Hello everyone, welcome to Under the Pallet Wrap. This week we want to talk about how difficult it is to grow your business these days. 10 years ago, e-commerce was a marketing problem, right? It was just about finding your customers to grow. Today, it feels more like an operational endurance test. And it's not because founders are failing. The environment has changed, and it's changed faster than the businesses themselves can evolve and their systems can cope with. In a recent report issued by the ILG, 53% of UK e-commerce businesses and founders now cite that fulfillment challenges are the biggest barrier to growth, not the marketing. So things have changed. Would you see that the same way, Keith? Is that what you would you understand from the people you talk to?
Well, I've seen a shift. We remember the glory days of e-commerce. They've been going back even 20 years. Very much marketing driven, and ops were hidden in the background, weren't they? Really, I mean, blamed for most things. Follow the orders. You know, no disrespect to the marketing teams. It was a very creative time. Ops sort of fell in line. Regulations hadn't caught up with e-commerce, and you know, you were a cost centre. Definitely, everyone used to frown at the costs, and we always used to be under scrutiny because you can always present your costs, whereas other costs were less tangible. But now, yeah, I mean, every conversation I have, everyone's looking to reduce ops costs, reconfigure their operation. I mean, it keeps us busy, but it's also, you know, it's very much on founders' minds to reduce some of what they think is a huge burden. Some of the things that they're talking about, of course, are things like, you know, new compliance and regulatory obligations. They want them to disappear. We can't make them disappear, but we can help build an operation or designed to support that. But yeah, definitely, ops is everywhere now, in the news, the fuel costs, everything. So I do feel that shift. Are you feeling it? It feels heavier, don't you think?
There's a reality there that says the operation is a lot more expensive than it used to be. But I do think that there is a problem in the way that operations are looked at, because they are generally, and you're always dealing in generalizations here, right? So there are definitely people who don't see it like this, but they do just see it as it's just a necessary evil. It's just a cost. They don't see the potential and the value add that operation can bring, what it can create and what it can release when it's really functioning and working well. You know, it's not somewhere that easily gets investment, shall we say. You know, you have to jump through a lot of hoops, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but, you know, I think it's much easier to go to your founder or as a founder to decide, you know what, I'm going to chuck this money into a new marketing campaign because it instantly drives something, right? When you invest in an operation, it can be some time before that investment starts to really deliver productivity savings, customer service, because it takes time to get it in, to bed it in, to make it work, to have that change established. You know, and because it's a sort of a longer burn, I think it has a longer win as well, but it takes longer to get there. There's often a reluctance for that to be where the money is spent. And I think there's a need to reframe investment in operations, you know, and particularly now, because as you say, everywhere you look in an operation, it's getting more expensive. Power costs, you know, and there's also more regulation. You need to be more environmental. There's more bureaucracy. You need to be able to report on this, that, and the other, and that grows as you scale as well. Things that you didn't have to do when you were a smaller business, as your earnings and your revenue grow, there's more demands on you to be able to meet certain targets, certain standards that you could get away with when you were small. And as you grow, you can't get away with that anymore, and there are requirements that you have to meet.
Do you think that maybe in the past, you know, founders, it was easier for founders to manage, or the ops side, and now it's just become too complicated. They feel like it takes up too much of their time. They thought it was easy. It's not as easy as maybe they anticipated. It's more expensive than they anticipated in the past.
I don't know that it was ever easy, right? I think it's
No,
different
not from
now,
our
but I think
perspective.
that things move faster now. And because things move faster, there's a greater need than ever before to be able to have good visibility and to see things in real time. Before even in e-commerce, it was not that quick, right? I mean, now we're talking about same day delivery, next day deliveries, people wanting to know the exact status of their orders at any time. That wasn't the case when we first started this fun. So I think it's always been bloody hard, but I think it's hard for different reasons. It's hard because expectations have grown, the speed of it has grown, what you can buy has grown. It's so diverse, the different offers. It's a much more complex, well-established beast these days, and that drives very. So when you used to run it with just a few people and just lent on them, it's not that simple these days. I think that if you can't see what's going on, you have real challenges to be able to sustain any kind of growth.
Well, so much emphasis was built on the convenience, getting products to the customer so quickly, and the choice. As we've discussed, it was about marketing, getting these products into people's living rooms. Expectations move forward at one pace, and now the reality, the world has changed. It's caught up, and you can't maintain that speed and that choice necessarily at the same cost. I mean, we love founders, don't we? There's a certain type, a person that tends to become a founder. Someone who's creative and driven, uh, phenomenal characters, so many positives. But what do they tend to miss, though?
I think that drive, that obsessive kind of, and I want to say blinkered, but it's focused on my products, my customers, my market, what I can sell. How do I sustain this? How do I grow this? There's a bit of a tendency to not look over your shoulder at those poor buggers in the warehouse that are trying to get those orders out every day.
It takes all sorts, doesn't it? But generally
Yeah,
dynamic visionaries, and they make things happen. They have to make things happen. So sometimes they get a bit frustrated at the ops manager who's saying no. I've always learnt to bridge that gap by saying yes, but rather than no. Like, yes, we can look at that, but we have to take into account X, Y, and Z. And that's always seems to be a good meeting point. They understand the technicality. They don't want to wade through it. They just want my trust that I'm doing something about it. But that can be where the gap starts forming for sure, with that forward thinking visionary approach versus the I'm the one who's actually under pressure here, trying to get these orders out the door with these systems that are falling apart, no budget and no support. That's where things can grow. Again, it doesn't happen everywhere, but these are the problems that we tend to
yeah.
see at businesses.
And I think if a founder, ops leader, CEO, COO have not got that tension, then they're probably not in a scaling business, because it's almost impossible to imagine that tension not being there. And it's okay as well. It's all right. As long as you both have an understanding that he's never going to like what I do because I'm always trying to make things happen faster. And the COO is, or the ops lead is thinking, the CEO's always going to be annoyed with me because I'm always trying to put control gates in, put some framework in, put some guardrails in, which are curbing his freedoms to just go wild. It's going to create tension. But I think as long as both of them recognize that that is the case, that there will also hopefully be a mutual respect for you're here to grow and to find vision, and you're here to put control and deliver service. And therefore, as long as they can each see that they are doing that for each other, then the tension is natural and okay. It needs to be manageable. If you have one who's very strong and one who's not, the balance doesn't work in either direction. Right? But you can never be in those jobs without expecting that tension. I've never been in one without having it.
We're looking for the word passionate workforce here, I think.
Yeah.
Aligned and passionate workforce. So we talked about how hard it is, and we briefly touched on some of the reasons. But what are some of the reasons why it's so much harder now operationally? We've got the political spectrum in front of us. Um, there's always been political tension, but it's been a bit unprecedented of late with various tariffs. So many years spent aligning trade practices, and suddenly there was Brexit, and now there's tariffs and other things of that nature. It makes it very hard to keep on top of, very unsettling, very hard to know how to make plans, and it certainly slows down a visionary who's they just want to get products out there. They don't really want someone talking about trade practice and executive orders in their ear. Um, so that's certainly something that's changed in recent years.
It definitely has. And I think that businesses go international much earlier in their lifespan than maybe in the past. I think that was always seen as you were a very established business if you traded internationally, where nowadays the smallest companies, because of the visibility and the availability of online access, means that you can be a fledgling business and you'll have customers seeking you from overseas, and immediately puts tension and complexity into what you do. And of course, more and more you're supplying from overseas as well. So the inbound is much more likely to be international than maybe it was in the past. And there's no doubt that that has become more. Is it true to say it's become more difficult? It's become more complex. I think there's much more systems and support out there as well, but it has become more complex and it changes more often now. Things like tariffs, as you say, they're a political weapon. So they are altered a lot, and the rules change more than ever. So for a visionary founder to be able to keep up with that, it's just not reasonable to
It's a
expect.
full-time job
Yeah, it's
to
not really.
keep up with
It's
the
never going to happen.
chopping and changing and what it means and the cost modelling. It's a full-time job. Um, it's a job that keeps compliance specialists more busy than they're accustomed to. It turns that into more than a full-time job. So, yeah, this sort of stuff is overwhelming and unsettling and prohibiting because you can't just go for it. You have to consider all sorts of implications.
Yeah, things move much faster because people can see online immediately. I want to buy that. Ping, they buy it. The order lands in the warehouse within 10 minutes. So your demand is constantly changing. What your priorities are constantly changing. So if you don't have the systems that give you that ever changing perspective, that visibility, trying to run those operations is so difficult. And again, this is where tension gets created because when you looked at the system an hour ago, you could see what was your highest priority customers that you were working on. You come back and there's now three or four ahead of it that you needed to do, and everything is changing. So the operation becomes more and more frustrated. And this was where one of the real blockers for growth becomes investment in what can be considered that cost center, that to run this operation now I need systems that all talk to each other. I had Shopify and I got a few apps that manage stock and help me ship out with couriers, but they don't talk to each other. And when you were small, that was okay, but as soon as you get bigger and more complex, suddenly you have to invest. Yeah, you can't just throw more people at it or just expect it to handle itself. You have to start to think of the things that need to be put in place for your business to survive. and flourish.
Certainly. And with all the new regulations in place, compliance regulations around traceability, sustainability, packaging, tax, you need that visibility that you never needed before. You need to track the whole life cycle from beginning to end. You need software, you need support. Uh, it's all there and it's all happening at the same time. And I can see how it can stress people out. It really can. It's hard to find people um, at a reasonable wage that know all this stuff inside out as well. So
It really is,
it's a
and
tough one.
I have great sympathy for a founder who's in this position, because while your business is new and it's growing, where you put your attention and your funds has a massive impact on whether you successfully grow or whether you stall or whether you diminish. So
That's where visibility helps because if it's actually saving you money that's otherwise just leaking, it might not be visible if you don't have if you don't know what it's costing you in the first place.
and that's the
It
problem.
might not be yeah, it's not affecting your revenue as such. It's more affecting your operating costs and your costs per order. If you're not measuring that, then it's not going to shout at you, is it? You're
No.
looking at the revenue and you're looking for investment. And you want to show people that there's a lot of revenue in your business and a lot of opportunity there. But whenever I've been involved in investment conversations, they always ask about operations. They always ask what the outgoings are. They always ask what the plans are to meet the demand.
But I guess it depends where you're getting your investment from. If it's external investment, yeah, absolutely. They're going to want to look at all the business. But if it's
Oh,
your
yes.
cash or it's the revenue that you're generating that you're reinvesting, it's your decision. You can make, you can do what you like with it.
Yeah,
So
if you're
the
entirely investing
rigorous
yourself,
review of perspective might not be quite the same, and that's where you can see the challenge of where do I put my, the limited funds that I have. And it goes back to what you were just starting to say, that there's no doubt at some point you have to recognize that you have to invest and have more people involved. But that in itself is a huge cost and a huge risk. Right? To decide you need, let's say, an ops director. If that's probably paying somebody as much or maybe even more than you take out of the business every year.
oh
Founders
yeah,
are very well known for not taking a lot out, but you have to pay this guy who's just spending your money endlessly. And obviously the drive is that you're spending money in a very, you know, you know, I try to find the right words, but you're very diligent in what you're spending it on, and you're not wasting it. And your life is about how to reduce that spend and make sure that the spend is value adding, and therefore the operation can do more and more with less. But he's still an expensive purchase and a high risk purchase, right? I mean, if you want to bring in an ops director, somebody who's got a huge amount of experience, you probably can't afford, right? So you bring in somebody you can afford, and what's the problem then? Well, they haven't got the experience, or they don't know the things that those experienced guys know.
I can see the
So
temptation to ignore it. Yeah, because especially if you're looking at all areas, like, oh, can we get by on the girl who wears 50 hats, manages customer service on top of logistics and social media? Do we really need a sales director? I see the temptation to wait. I've seen very small businesses made up of 10 executives and 2 interns, and then also businesses that are one founder and the gap is so big, and then you've just got people on their first or second job trying to make strategic decisions on operations and marketing and
yeah,
sales. So either one, is a risk. When you have high level people performing menial tasks, it's not always ideal either. I mean, they're not best placed to do it. That's not where they built their career into. Some people love that part of it, but no one wants it to go on forever. But Even an executive will be employed and after a while say you need to invest in a team, and the founder may still say, well, why you're doing it? It's the same situation, just a much higher wage. It's almost the expertise, but not the doing.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I've seen it many, many times. So when is the right time to make that decision? And what can founders do? They're not suddenly going to find budget left, right, and centre. We're not trying to tell them to, but what can they do? What are the top tips for a founder who is really struggling these days with these high costs and volatile environment? What sort of thing can they do to stand themselves in good stead, make the right investment?
Um, yeah, it's there are so many things rushing around my head when you ask that question. That's where do I start? Um,
And we can start with the basics. Should
so
they
yeah,
should they
so
hire
so so one of
hire
the
a
things,
fractional
yeah,
person,
so
perhaps?
yeah, because there's a lot of technical things that jump out at me, and I think, oh well, they need to look at that, need to look at that. But I think the first thing is that I would always recommend is that you need somebody else to look at your business, because you look at it through very particular eyes. And I think there's a huge amount of value of getting a different opinion of somebody that has from a different background. It's generally a more operational, structured, or maybe an established background, to be able to say, here are the areas where you are weak or where you are at risk. Because if you've grown up with it and it's just grown with you, you don't see the problems. You don't see, because it's kind of grown with you, and you don't realize what a challenging process or challenging operation or flow that you have. So I would always recommend to a founder, just get somebody with an experienced, fresh set of eyes to take a look and give you a perspective of where you're at risk. Because it's really interesting. If we talk, we kind of focus a bit on e-commerce, and if you think about, if you start up an e-commerce business, you probably start it on Shopify, and within Shopify, there's all these wonderful little apps that can help you do amazing things. The difficulty is you buy them in piecemeal and they don't really fit together very well and they don't talk to each other. So you've got this one app that tells you what your inventory is or helps you order from suppliers, and this one connects you to the couriers and stuff, but they don't talk to each other. And so you've kind of got this. There are so many tools out there that you could buy or you can subscribe to and utilize, but when you do it in this kind of piecemeal, growing bit by bit, they generally end up not talking to each other. So there's a very simple principle that your business needs one truth. You need to be able to, when the person who's ordering the stock in from suppliers, they need to be looking at the same data that the people that are pushing orders out to customers are. If they're looking at different versions of that truth, they're going to make wrong decisions. So one of the first things that anybody who looks at a business from externally will look at is, how visible is what you do? Can I see what your demand is? Can I see what your stock is? Can I see what you've got on order, what's coming in? And that's always a great place. And what that inevitably leads to is these two things. One is you probably need to invest in systems, i.e. integrated systems where you can see across your business. And secondly, you need to invest in some people that know what to do with that information. And once you have those two, then you can start building process. You can start building structure. I'm not saying buy the systems and then build the structure. They need to do that at the same time. But as soon as someone looks from the outside, one of the first things you see is a lack of visibility normally. Right?
Well, I think the first thing is to get someone to have a look at it. I agree. And we talk about single source of truth. I think also ensuring that the people working at the company are talking the same language as well, because that can often be uh, when you're a founder and you're so busy, like dealing with one person at a time, there'll be misinterpretations of what you've been asked to do and why you're doing it, and people can very quickly form into silos. So actually getting everyone else on board to the vision, telling everyone what that vision is, can be a massive, massive start. And from there, I agree. Like, there's often a case where systems there's no training documentation, and no one's truly clear how to use certain platforms. So I've always found that mapping back, use what are you using it for, what the fields you need, what are your guides, how are you using these systems, where does your information go, what are you trying to do,
Yeah.
um, bare basics. Now this is something that a founder's not going to have time to do, and they need someone to come in and have a look in that respect. Um, and we talked about, you mentioned processes. I mean, these things come as part of that diagnostic review. Do you actually have any processes, first and foremost? Do you need any? Most of the time, yes. Because if you don't have the processes, how can you understand whether the systems are talking to each other and whether they're achieving what you set out to do, or where the gaps are, or where people's time is wasted? So there's so much wasted time, wasted processes. No one's going to know that until you have a look. I mean, there's a couple more things I'd add, like with my background. I'd look at how things are supposed to work and cost versus what they actually cost. And we talked about this in previous podcasts. Measure something. Are they measuring anything? Let's have a look at how you're performing in key areas. Like in terms of transit times, carrier costs, duty and tax costs. There's a whole number of things that could, need to start with, and then from there, I think the systems. There's always a tendency. You can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I think there's often a tendency from people. I'll just buy something to fix the problem. Buy a platform.
Sure.
Buy a new platform. Buy a better platform. But quite often there's a lot of life in the existing platforms. It's just a bit of customization,
Yeah.
integration, learning can do a lot of the heavy lifting. The new
No, you're
platform,
right.
there's so many platforms out there, aren't there? What is the best one for a particular business? They're all off the peg at the end of the day. Some are built for marketplaces, some are not. There's some that specialise in certain elements of the business you're operating, but everyone's got enough of a niche that there's always going to be something missing. And I think you've got to fill those gaps with the knowledge and the understanding, and then the prioritization. What is it
Yeah, yeah,
costing you? What is it costing the team? When will it break? How will it break? What's going to happen if we don't
yeah.
fix this?
No, you're right. I mean, yeah, when I say yes, we need to invest in systems, it's not necessarily new ones. It might be the ones you have, but just making sure that they talk to each other. They're looking at everything from the same base data. So what the person that's buying new stock is looking at the same inventory as the guy who's shipping orders out. So
Oh,
they're
absolutely, yeah.
they're working off the same hymn sheet, if you like. And you're absolutely right.
Understanding the gaps. It's not easy to do when you're amidst the forest. It's hard to step away. Um, but in our roles, we're here to advocate this because it's what we do. But you don't always have to invest in that ops director, on a six-figure salary to do this work. There's people like us around who, for set period of time can get involved in the business, have a look, and provide very clear and detailed assessments of what could and should happen next, and that can be phased in a
Yep.
manageable way. There is a tendency, I believe, at startups, everything needs to be all or nothing here and now, and the difference between getting something done is way more dramatic than the reality. It's just about having clarity. Clarity is the
And the
most
need to move at
important thing.
pace. The need to be, you tend to recognize a problem. And if that problem is, I need an operations leader to be able to manage all of this, well, you can't wait 6 months to recruit one. Right? Realizing today that you need it and then having to wait 6 months, there's a huge amount of things that can happen in that 6 months' time. Much more so in a smaller growing business than in a well-established business. In a well-established business, you can handle this kind of shortfall. But if you recognize that you're missing that key person, the ability to be able to go, okay, right, in the next couple of weeks, I can get somebody in. We do a lot of fractional work. So, we've got long backgrounds of experience. So we've done a lot, we've seen a lot, we've experienced a lot. So when we help other companies, we're more likely to see the things because we've got the scars.
They
Right?
might not need a director's
Yeah,
input
exactly.
after 2 or 3 months. They might just need a coordinator.
Yeah,
But they've invested in a long-term director with
exactly.
equity and all the rest of it, and possibly not necessary at the stage they were at. But it's necessary.
When you realise the need and you instigate a recruitment of an exec of some description, you have to wait a long time for a start. It costs you a lot of money. But then you've got to get them on board, established. The risk of getting it wrong is still relatively high. But if you take the other option and say, okay, I'm going to use a contractor or a freelancer or someone who's got the experience, I can bring them in straight away. Within a few weeks, if you decide you don't think they're any good, you get rid of them. And then you get somebody else in. So you have a greater degree of flexibility and agility. You can do it now, get on with it. You've got that person who can just do a day a week if that's what it needs to be. And then once you establish something, you might need them 3 days a week. In a few months' time, you might need to drop that back down to 2, or you might be able to stop it altogether because you've reached a point where you understand exactly what you need, and then you can potentially put a full-timer in. But for so many businesses, particularly in that supply chain operations leadership space, you don't need someone there every day. You don't need someone there watching the warehouse, what they're actually doing. The guys on the floor with a bit of process, KPIs and systems, they can get on with it. And they're responsible people. They know what they're doing. They're performance managed. What you need is some leadership on making the decisions to say, if we go in that direction, what will it mean? What will it do? Those are the people that you can just draw on. And that's where fractional leadership suddenly becomes a real potential huge benefit for much less investment and much less commitment you're not putting so much risk in your business that you're employing someone you'd have to pay to get rid of it. It's a severance issue. Give yourself the flexibility. You don't really know exactly what you want in this early stage, so just bring in some experience, utilize it while it's useful, and move it on when you don't need it anymore. And that's how we thrive in our business, because we don't want a full-time position. We want to work with multiple companies. So if somebody doesn't need us anymore in a business, it's fine. Thank you. We'll walk away happy that we've made a difference, and we'll start helping somebody else. So the whole thing becomes much more fluid and agile, which early business scaling is exactly what they need.
With someone who's clearly got a mission in mind to help the founder on their way, is going to build capability within the team as well. So, capability that can be built that the founder doesn't necessarily possess. Like the founder provides the energy and the culture, but someone can come in and just build the gaps in knowledge that can help give the team confidence to meet the founder's vision, to come up with solutions, to understand what good looks like, where they are versus good. That's often the biggest confusion. And people think they're going home at the end of the day thinking they're doing a perfect job. But, they don't know because no one's actually questioned them before. Did you check the carrier billing? No, you don't. You trust it, etc. It's asking questions of people is very important. So, I think there's a lot a founder can do.
Do you find
Contacts as well? There's often, when it comes to the amount a founder has to think about these days, when it comes to packaging, carriers, brokers, shipping, B2C,
it's endless.
sustainability, packaging tax, VAT, IOS. There's so many, such a long list.
And this is why they all work 7 days a week, 20 hours a day, right? And
it's a worry. It's a worry because they don't, they don't know they're doing it properly. And yeah, before you know it, you've got 500 agencies on board as well. I mean, I've seen that as well. So many agencies. You've got an agency for Shopify, an agency for finance, an agency for HR. And before you know it, you've got about 50 companies on your books as well.
yeah.
So, yes, there's plenty a founder can do. There's loads of people out there in the network.
Do you find that
Um,
people, that founders recognize that that fractional option is there? I'm
I'm not
amazed at how
sure.
many times I talk to people and they've not even considered it as an option.
Well, you see a lot of recruitment going on still with, yeah, it does beg the question. Um, it's just the norm. I just recruit whenever in doubt. Let's just put a
Yeah.
job out there. I think there's a tendency, correct me if I'm wrong, but sometimes jobs are open for a long, long time. I think like the interview cycle is almost sometimes, from what I've heard, used as a consultancy session, gaining information from the interviews almost, dragging that bit out. Not sure what they want, really not sure what they want until they meet the right person. Um, really great interviews, but no decision at the end of it because the founder doesn't have the confidence at the end of the
Because it's
process
a
to
big
actually
commitment.
know what they want.
It's a big commitment, right? If you're going to employ, let's say an ops director, you say it's probably a 6-figure salary, and that's a big commitment, you know.
Huge commitment, and we've all seen it when it hasn't worked out. Massive overhaul.
Because we got into what they can do about it. So I guess our call to action is to say to founders that are struggling with massive complexity and struggling to create fluidity and quality in their businesses. They don't need to go running off to recruit people. That there is available on tap solutions. People that can make a difference quickly and then move on. It's that call to action is to look beyond recruitment.
Yeah. So we've established that there's a lot that founders can do. Help is at hand. Um, Maybe the message isn't clear enough to them. Hopefully, we have some founders watching the podcast today, and they understand that there are options for them.
My, kind of statement I would make to founders is that business is hard. It's harder than ever, but there's support out there that you don't have to commit to for the next 10 years, that you can get quickly, that can deliver quickly and get out quickly if that's what's needed. And it's as flexible as you need it to be. And, your business can learn a lot and can establish a lot in a short point of time if you find the right people. And that doesn't necessarily mean go out and recruit an exec. Utilize that
100%.
portfolio economy. Use fractionals, use freelancers. They're there, and there's some very talented people out there.
So 100% empathy with founders out there. It is tough, very tough, tougher than it's ever been. But there is help out there. I guess it's our job, Dan, to make make the message a bit louder and clearer.
Absolutely. I think we know that we've made a difference in businesses and we've helped businesses, so we know that can be achieved. And while it's always tough for a founder, you sometimes need to be able to hit pause just for a moment, stand still, and look around you, and think that this could run better, and there are people that can help you do that and allow you to get on with what you do best.
Indeed. We're both in agreement there. In the next few weeks, we hope to have some exciting guests for you to join the party, join the fun, and bring a new perspective to our discussions. So, news on that soon. But for now, in this awful hot weather, we wilt and wish you goodbye for this week.
I think there's a clear shine on both of our foreheads at the moment. And yes, we look forward to a cooler podcast next week. But we shouldn't complain about the sunshine. It's great.
No, I just want to be outside in it.
It's absolutely. Well, let's go and do that. Bye for now.